Firstly, I just want to say that the contributions that we've just heard recently from government backbenchers here on this have been meaningful. They've been considered. They've raised some very valid points in terms of vacancy and dereliction, about the problems of local authorities not using the one-stage approval process for social housing beneath €6 million, and the contrast between what local authorities are saying and the department are saying. There have been considered contributions, and I say that because that contrasts with what we saw in the first half hour here, where we saw, instead of seeing a serious contribution from the Minister, instead of seeing some serious detailed analysis of Housing for All and hearing his view of what he thinks is working well, what's not working so well, what he's doing to address those challenges that aren't working so well, instead, we got most of the time was used really in what seemed to me as some sort of delusional misstep from reality in terms of absolute praise as to how everything in Housing for All is brilliant, and the rest of the time just used to attack the main opposition party. And I think the people who are suffering deeply from this housing crisis deserve a serious, detailed consideration of Housing for All and the housing issue. They deserve nothing less than that. I think it's disrespectful in the extreme to people who are suffering from housing to see that type of behaviour, and it is welcome to see that others here are well able to make serious and meaningful contributions, and I want to acknowledge that. And of course, many people in this House are able to do that, and that's what we should all be doing. And to say, Cathaoirleach, then to see the Minister for Housing, while opposition, before leaving after about 15 or 20 minutes of opposition remarks, seeing the Minister for Housing for most of that time when people are raising serious points, smirking and laughing and so forth. I don't think that is an appropriate response. He's absolutely entitled to disagree, but I really feel this should be taken with the utmost seriousness that it deserves. Cathaoirleach, the fact is, in the housing disaster that we have at the moment, is that the government is not meeting the targets that it has set itself. It's not spending the budget that is allocated for itself on housing. I do worry sometimes when you see the government so caught up in its own messaging and propaganda, or to be fair, parts of the government, not all of the government are doing this. When you see that, I do wonder, do they not realise, some parts of the government, do they not realise the depths of this crisis and what's happening now? If you look at the different metrics on this, new rents have increased by 9% in the last year, house prices by 8% in the last year, homelessness by a staggering 32%, and the number of children who are homeless and living in emergency accommodation by 47%, which has a profound impact on their development and well-being. And at the same time, we see profits of the largest developer in the country go up by 84%. Rents have never been so high, house prices never so high, and homelessness never so high. And I don't think these things are an accident. I think they are as a result of decisions that are made. This is having a devastating impact on people who are just trying to build a decent life for themselves and for their families. I want to give one example of a person who's been affected badly by this housing crisis, and this is by no means an example of what's, of someone who's suffering the most or anything like this. But one example of Niall, who he's a lecturer in Trinity College, just down the road from here, and he's living in hostels because he cannot find somewhere more secure to live. Over the last few weeks, he says he's developed a nagging cough because of his accommodation. He shares with up to 10 people at a time, including stag party groups and dormitories. He says, and I quote, "The kitchen and laundry facilities are dismal, plus it's hard to eat healthily. There's nowhere to sit and get work done in the evening. I'm coming into the college more and more tired each day." This wasn't acceptable when it was students that couldn't find somewhere to live and they were living in hostels mixed in with tourists and stag parties and so forth. It's not acceptable when it's lecturers. It's not acceptable when it's anyone else who has nowhere secure to live. Homeless outreach volunteers working in Dublin, doing voluntary work, are reporting time and again that when they're trying to help people get into emergency accommodation, that no beds are available. Last week they were reporting that a 3-month-old and a 2-year-old were left out on the streets at night as there was nowhere for them to go. And as they were ringing the different homeless agencies, the only advice they could give was that the families should go to the Garda station. That was the only advice, as everything else was full. This is the reality of the homeless and the housing situation for people right now at the moment. Now, at the same time as this, we see over the weekend, we see coverage from Killian Woods in the Business Post of what's been happening in an estate in Swords. Now, this only came to light, incidentally, because TD lives in that estate and was selling their home, and they began to see this pattern. So this could well be happening in lots of other, presumably is happening in lots of other estates around the country. We only know about this because of those particular circumstances. In that estate in Swords, where typical homes are usually sold for about €350,000, this year a home was sold for €850,000 to an investment fund, and another from €1.7 million, incredibly, to an investment fund. These homes were originally bought by Davy Platform, ICAV, and then were bought from a company called Manuston Trading Limited. Another 7 homes in this estate were bought from BAE Systems, a British weapons manufacturer. $5.3 million was spent buying up 9 homes in the estate, meaning an average of about $592,000 per home last April, when at the same time the median price in the area was €352,000. This is mind-boggling stuff. It's highly plausible that the reason such high prices are being paid out for these homes is because they're likely, the investment funds that own these will likely be able to avail of 25-year long-term leases with the local authority for these. Doesn't explain the €1.7 million figure. And we know that the local authority in this area is leasing 18 homes in this estate, long-term leases. I did raise this with the Taoiseach earlier, and I did think from his comments that he seemed to think it was okay because it was one investment fund selling to another investment fund. I think that's treating them as financial assets, and I don't think that is in any way okay. We also have recent reports in another area in Dublin of 211 apartments in Clonsilla, which was funded entirely by loans through the state's Home Building Finance Ireland, and yet these 211 homes are being sold onto an investment fund, Urbeo. These, given that this is through state-financed loans, these homes definitely could have and should have been built so that people could buy them, or for affordable purchase, or for cost rental, or for social housing. And to be using state-backed finance in this way for homes to end up in the hands of investment funds, I think is completely and utterly wrong and indefensible. Incredibly bad value for money. Clearly pushes up the price of housing, and be much better for the state or local authority to be directly buying homes rather than creating these win-wins for investment funds. We know, and this is something that I think we should have heard from the Minister on. I did ask him about this last week and he wouldn't comment, but we know from coverage that memos given to the Cabinet Subcommittee confirm the targets set for delivering affordable and social homes will fall significantly short this year. A 240 million capital housing underspend in 2022 is forecast in the budget documents that were published last week. We also know from the August Fiscal Monitor that capital expenditure on housing is more than 20% lower at this time than it was this time last year. So how is it possible, with everything that's going on, that there's such an capital underspend going on in housing? And why is it that the Minister comes in here and doesn't explain these things to us and give serious analysis on it, and give a serious contribution as to how he's seriously committed to tackling these things? Because I don't believe that the contribution that he made earlier on in any way reflects the seriousness of this crisis, or indeed the seriousness that most others have treated this in the discussion so far.
Thank you, Deputy O'Callaghan.